Is Sound of Freedom a QAnon-tinged thriller? Here is a statistic from SaveTheChildren.org. Child trafficking affects every country in the world, including the United States. Children make up 27% of all human trafficking victims worldwide, and 2 out of every 3 identified child victims are girls. And this clip comes to us from Fox News. I got this from Fox, but this is really CNN talking about the Sound of Freedom. Let's listen.
These films are created out of moral panics. They're created out of bogus statistics. They're created out of fear. And with something like Sound of Freedom, it specifically is looking at QAnon concepts of these child trafficking rings that are run by the high-level elites.
For some reason, the entire media is smearing this movie as a dangerous conspiracy theory.
Yeah, go figure. Why are they doing that? Why would there be such a push at CNN, MSNBC, and to include Rolling Stone? They came out with this article. The headline said, Sound of Freedom is a superhero movie for dads with brainworms. Subtitle, because it needed one, right? The QAnon-tinged thriller about child trafficking is designed to appeal to the conscience of a conspiracy-addled boomer. Is Sound of Freedom a QAnon-tinged thriller? Therein lies the question. But let's talk. Let me go take you just through a little bit of this article over at the Rolling Stone. Quote, based on a true story, close quote. I heard from somewhere across the theater. The familiar words had appeared on screen. An elderly man had taken it upon himself to read them aloud to the rest of a sizable audience seated for a matinee showing of the anti-child trafficking thriller Sound of Freedom, starring Jim Caviezel. For the seasoned moviegoer, this phrase is a joke. We know that the cinema will stretch almost any truth to the breaking point, but this crowd, I could tell, would view the events depicted over the next 2+ hours as entirely literal. Clearly, there must be nothing true in this film. It must all just be Hollywood's fictional portrayal because it's, quote, based on a true story. That's kind of where this guy is going. By the way, this is Miles Klee over at the Rolling Stone writing. Miles goes on to say, quote, Caviezel, best known for his being tortured to death in Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, has become a prominent figure on the conspiracist right, giving speeches and interviews in which he hints at the underground holy war between patriots and a sinister legion of evildoers who are harvesting the blood of children. It's straight up QAnon stuff, right down to his use of catchphrases like, the storm is upon us. Here, he gets to act out some of that drama by playing a fictionalized version of Tim Ballard, head of the anti-sex trafficking nonprofit operation Underground Railroad, in a feature film that cast the operator as a Batman-style savior for kids sold into sex trade. Now, I don't remember the cape and the mask, but maybe I should watch it again. I should do that. I should definitely go watch it a second time, giving my hard-earned money to the Sound of Freedom for, rewarding them for portraying something that needs to be portrayed. Miles goes on to say, Ballard himself has dabbled in Q-adjacent conspiracy theories, such as the Wayfair trafficking hoax, while his organization has far-right affinities and long record of distorting its botched raids, which rely on bizarre tactics like asking psychics where to find victims for rescue. Ballard, Caviezel, and others of their ilk had primed the public to accept Sound of Freedom as a documentary rather than delusion by fomenting moral panic for years over this grossly exaggerated epidemic of child sex trafficking, much of it funneling people into conspiracy rabbit holes and QAnon communities. Poor Miles Klee being surrounded by all of these right-wing QAnon people. The poor fella. It's a good thing he made it out alive. Maybe Hollywood will make a movie about his heroic venture into the theater, surrounded by such crazy right-wingers. I think you get the point of what I'm trying to communicate here in Miles Klee and his expose on the expose of Sound of Freedom. I want you to let that sink in for a second, though, because imagine if just for a second, if Miles Klee here wrote similar articles about films that exposed, the abuse of Catholic priests on children, on minors. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, Hollywood would never depict the abuse of adults, males, which is primarily the victims in those circumstances, not minors. It's mostly adults, post-pubescent males. You know, Hollywood is never going to make a film about the actual issue of the homosexuality within the priesthood. That's never going to be covered. So don't you worry, Miles, that won't be covered. But what about the children? Will you write exposés on these films? Will you write the same sort of vitriolic, QAnon-laced, nonsense on these films, like By the Grace of God in 2019? Probably not. How about Spotlight 2016? I bet you praised that one, Miles. I bet you really just gave a high five to the incredible, important work of exposing the darkness found within the Catholic Church. I bet you did, Miles. I looked up the 2022 Trafficking in Persons report from the federal government. And, one thing that stood out to me in this 636-page report out of the federal government for trafficking in persons in July of 2022, not only is it getting worse, but there's no executive summary. Most of these reports, they almost always give you an executive summary. This one doesn't. It wants you to plow through all 636 pages of their blah, 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 to discover hidden in there is this is a major problem. In fact, it's such a bad problem that the same government who released that report has lost track of 85,000 children who were smuggled across our southern border, released to criminals in many cases in the United States, not to their parents, not to their cousins, their aunts, their uncles, which, by the way, statistically are the primary abusers of children, our relatives. But this federal government lost track of 85,000 migrant children. It's either true or it's not. And if it's true, why would we convince anyone otherwise? CNN, Rolling Stone, I'm asking you.